Have you ever had someone belittle your achievements, only to watch karma work its magic years later? That's exactly what happened to me. If you've ever been underestimated or mocked for your education choices, stick around because this story of sweet professional revenge might just make your day. Hit that subscribe button if you love stories about comeuppance and career growth. I still remember the sting of humiliation that day in the conference room. It was 5 years ago, but the memory remains crystal clear. I had just joined Apex Technologies, a mid-sized software company in Boston, as a junior project manager. It was my first real job after completing my degree in organizational psychology. The company had assembled the team for our Monday morning meeting. There were about 15 of us gathered around the long oak table: developers, UX designers, marketing specialists, and me, the newest face in the crowd. I was nervous but excited, dressed in my carefully chosen outfit, a navy blazer and gray slacks that I'd spent nearly half my first paycheck on. Our team leader, Marcus, was introducing everyone for my benefit. When he got to me, he said, "And this is Alex, our new project manager who just joined us from Westfield State." That's when I heard it. A distinct scoff from across the table. "Something funny, Richard?" Marcus asked. Richard Daniels was the senior developer on the team. In his early 40s, he had that air of technical superiority that some veteran programmers carry, like they're perpetually annoyed at having to explain things to mere mortals. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "Organizational psychology? Really?" Richard said, looking directly at me. I didn't realize we were hiring people with degrees in feelings now. I thought we needed someone who could actually manage technical projects. The room went quiet. I felt my face burning, a mixture of embarrassment and anger rising in my chest. Before I could respond, Richard continued. "No offense," he said, which of course meant he was about to say something offensive. "But those soft science degrees are basically participation trophies. What do they even teach you? How to organize group hugs?" A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus cleared his throat and tried to move on, but the damage was done. My introduction to the team had been completely undermined by this arrogant developer who seemed to take personal offense at my educational background. After the meeting, Marcus pulled me aside and apologized for Richard's behavior. "Don't take it personally," he said. "Richard is brilliant with code, but terrible with people. That's just how he is." But I did take it personally. How could I not? In my first hour at a new job, I'd been publicly humiliated and had my qualifications questioned. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, trying to compose myself. I looked in the mirror and made a decision. I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't complain to HR. Instead, I would prove Richard wrong. I would show him and everyone else exactly what someone with my background could accomplish. Those first few months were challenging. Richard continued to undermine me at every opportunity. In meetings, he would question my decisions with a dismissive tone. "Are you sure that's the right approach, Alex? Maybe in psychology class that works, but in the real world of software development..." He would send emails addressing technical questions to others on the team, deliberately excluding me from conversations I needed to be part of. When I would try to contribute ideas, he would interrupt with, "Let's hear from someone with technical experience." But here's the thing about having a degree in organizational psychology. I understood group dynamics and human behavior. I could see that Richard felt threatened, though I wasn't sure why. I also knew that responding with anger or going to management would only reinforce his narrative about me. Instead, I watched and learned. I stayed late studying our code base until my eyes burned. I read technical documentation during lunch breaks. I asked questions of the other developers, who were actually quite helpful when Richard wasn't around. I also did what I was actually hired to do. I managed the project effectively, I created systems that improved our workflow. I resolved conflicts between team members. I identified bottlenecks in our processes and found solutions. 3 months into the job, we faced our first crisis. A major client was threatening to pull their contract because of repeated delays. The previous project manager had promised features that weren't delivered on time, and the client was furious. Marcus called an emergency meeting. Everyone was tense, knowing how important this client was to the company. Marcus explained the situation and asked for ideas. Richard immediately jumped in with a technical solution that would require at least 2 weeks of development time. Others suggested compromises that the client had already rejected. The room was filled with the energy of panic. I had been quiet, listening and taking notes. When there was a pause, I spoke up. "I've been reviewing the contract and the client's feedback," I said. "The issue isn't actually about the specific features they're asking for. It's about feeling disrespected because we've missed deadlines without proper communication." Richard rolled his eyes. "Great, psychoanalysis. That'll fix the code." I continued despite his interruption. What if we approach this differently? Instead of promising more features that we might not deliver on time, what if we give them complete transparency into our development process? Daily updates, access to our project management tools, scheduled check-ins. "Clients don't want to see how the sausage is made," Richard interjected. "Actually," I said, "based on my research into their company culture and previous communications, transparency is highly valued by their team. They've mentioned feeling kept in the dark multiple times." I laid out a detailed plan that included a revised timeline, daily communication protocols, and a proposal for how to involve the client in prioritizing features for the next sprint. To my surprise, Marcus loved the idea. "This addresses their core concern without making promises we can't keep," he said. "Let's try it." Richard was visibly annoyed, but couldn't argue with Marcus's decision. We implemented my plan, and within 2 weeks, the client's attitude had completely changed. They appreciated being brought into the process and having their concerns acknowledged. The crisis was averted. After that success, things began to shift. Team members started coming to me with issues, not just related to project timelines, but also conflicts and communication problems. Marcus gave me more responsibility, and I was included in strategic meetings I hadn't been invited to before. Richard, however, doubled down on his resentment. His comments became more pointed, his attempts to undermine me more obvious. But they had less impact now that I had proven my value to the team. 1 year into my time at Apex, an opportunity arose. The company was creating a new department focused on improving internal processes and client relations. Essentially, organizational effectiveness. It was a perfect fit for my background. I applied for the role of department director, knowing it was a long shot. I was competing against people with more experience, including some external candidates with impressive resumes. The interview process was grueling. 4 rounds with different executives, a presentation to the board, and a detailed plan for how I would structure the new department. I poured everything I had learned from both my education and my year at Apex into my application. 2 weeks later, Marcus called me into his office. I was prepared for a letdown, ready to congratulate whoever had gotten the position and continue proving myself in my current role. "We've made a decision about the Director of Organizational Effectiveness position," Marcus said, his expression neutral. "I understand if you went with someone more experienced," I began. A smile broke across his face. "We want you, Alex." I couldn't believe it. Me, the person with the supposedly useless degree, moving into a director-level position after just 1 year. When the announcement was made, most of the team was supportive. I received congratulatory emails and handshakes. Richard, however, was noticeably silent. The new role was challenging but incredibly fulfilling. I was building something from scratch, applying theories and practices I had studied in school to real-world problems. My team grew from just me to 5 people within 6 months. We implemented changes that improved efficiency across departments and received recognition from the CEO for our contribution to client satisfaction rates. 2 years into my new role, I heard that Richard had been passed over for promotion again. Despite his technical skills, his inability to work effectively with others had limited his advancement. I felt a twinge of sympathy. For all his arrogance, he was genuinely talented at what he did. I decided to reach out to him. Not to gloat, but to see if there was a way to bridge the gap that had formed between us. I invited him for coffee, and to my surprise, he accepted. Our conversation was awkward at first. We made small talk about projects and office gossip. Finally, I addressed the elephant in the room. "Richard, I know we didn't get off to a great start, but I've always respected your technical abilities. I'm wondering if there's a way we could work together more effectively." He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup. "I was a jerk to you," he said finally. "I made assumptions based on your degree, without knowing anything about you." His admission surprised me. "Can I ask why? What was it about my background that bothered you so much?" He sighed. "It wasn't really about you. My previous company brought in a consultant with a psychology background who implemented a bunch of team-building exercises and personality tests that wasted everyone's time. When you joined with a similar degree, I assumed you'd be more of the same. All theory and no practical value. And now?" I asked. "Now I've seen what you've actually done. The changes your department has made have actually made my job easier. The development team is running more smoothly than it ever has." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was progress. From that day forward, our professional relationship improved. Richard even started coming to my department with suggestions for process improvements. We weren't friends, but we had developed a mutual respect. 3 years after our coffee meeting, Apex underwent a major reorganization. The company had grown significantly, and the executive team was restructuring departments to better align with our expanded client base. I was promoted to Vice President of Organizational Development, with responsibility for several departments including project management, client relations, and internal training. It was a significant step up, with a seat on the executive committee and a substantial increase in both responsibility and compensation. As part of the reorganization, I needed to hire directors for each of the departments under my purview. The project management director position was particularly crucial, as it would oversee all technical projects across the company. I was reviewing resumes with HR when a familiar name caught my eye. Richard Daniels had applied for the position. My initial reaction was a skepticism. Richard was an excellent developer, but he had always seemed more interested in code than in managing people. I wondered if this was really the right move for him. But as I reviewed his application, I saw something interesting. Over the past few years, Richard had been taking courses in project management. He had even completed a certification program. His cover letter mentioned how he had come to appreciate the importance of effective team dynamics and communication in technical projects. I decided to interview him, curious about this apparent transformation. When Richard walked into my office for the interview, there was a noticeable change in his demeanor. Gone was the defensive arrogance. Instead, he seemed thoughtful and prepared. "I have to admit, I was surprised to see your application," I said, after we had settled in. "I imagine you were," he replied with a small smile. "It's not a path I would have seen for myself a few years ago." "What changed?" I asked. "Working on projects that were well managed versus poorly managed showed me the difference that good leadership makes," he said. "And watching how your initiatives transformed the company made me realize there's more to success than just technical skills." The interview continued, and I was impressed by Richard's thoughtful answers about team building, conflict resolution, and project planning. He had clearly done the work to develop skills beyond his technical expertise. After interviewing all the candidates, I faced a difficult decision. Richard wasn't the most experienced in management, but he had unparalleled technical knowledge and had demonstrated a genuine commitment to developing the necessary skills. In the end, I offered him the position. When I called to tell him, there was a moment of silence on the phone. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. "After how I treated you when you first joined." "I'm not hiring you despite our past," I said. "I'm hiring you because you're the right person for the job. You know the technical side better than anyone, and you've shown that you're willing to learn and grow." "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "I won't let you down." And he hasn't. It's been 2 years since Richard became the Director of Project Management, reporting directly to me. The irony of our situation isn't lost on either of us. The person who mocked my degree now works under my leadership. But there's no satisfaction in that irony, no desire for revenge or comeuppance. Instead, there's a shared understanding that we've both grown and learned. Richard has become an excellent director, combining his technical expertise with newly developed leadership skills. I've benefited from his insights and experience in ways that have made me a better executive. Looking back at that first meeting, when Richard scoffed at my organizational psychology degree in front of the entire team, I never could have imagined where we'd end up. But that moment, painful as it was, set in motion a journey that transformed both our careers. What I've learned from this experience is that education, whether it's a degree in psychology or computer science or anything else, is just the beginning. It's what you do with that knowledge, how you apply it and continue to grow, that truly matters. I've also learned the power of proving yourself through actions rather than arguments. When Richard mocked my degree, I could have fought back with words, tried to defend the validity of my education. Instead, I let my work speak for itself, and that ultimately had a far greater impact. Today, Apex is thriving. Our company has more than doubled in size, and our organizational structure, built on principles I studied in those useless psychology classes, has been key to managing that growth effectively. Richard's department consistently delivers projects on time and within budget, something that wasn't happening before. Sometimes, in executive meetings, I catch Richard's eye across the table, and there's a moment of shared recognition, a silent acknowledgement of how far we've both come from that first confrontation. It's not about who was right or wrong anymore. It's about how we've both contributed to something successful. If there's one message I'd like to share from this experience, it's this: don't let anyone else's judgment define your path. Whether it's a degree they don't understand, a career choice they question, or abilities they underestimate, their opinions are just that. Opinions, not facts. Your value isn't determined by someone else's perception. It's determined by what you bring to the table, how you respond to challenges, and your willingness to keep growing and learning. And for those who, like Richard, find themselves quick to judge others based on limited information, remember that today's junior team member might be tomorrow's vice president. The person whose degree you mock might someday be the one reviewing your job application. But more importantly, remember that we all have something to learn from each other. Richard's technical expertise has been invaluable to me, just as my organizational insights have ultimately benefited him. When we move past judgment to collaboration, everyone wins. As for me, I don't regret a single credit hour of my organizational psychology degree. Those classes taught me not just about workplace dynamics and human behavior, but about resilience and perspective. Tools that have served me well in navigating both professional challenges and interpersonal conflicts. And that's the thing about education. Its true value often reveals itself in unexpected ways and at unexpected times. The knowledge that seems theoretical in a classroom becomes powerfully practical when applied to real-world problems. So to anyone who's ever had their education or qualifications questioned, who's been made to feel less than because their degree doesn't fit someone else's idea of what's valuable, keep going. Your understanding of the world brings something unique to the table, something that may be exactly what's needed, even if others don't see it yet. That's been my journey, from being mocked in a conference room to leading from the executive suite. It wasn't about proving Richard wrong. It was about proving myself right. And along the way, both of us discovered that our different perspectives, when combined rather than conflicted, created something better than either of us could have achieved alone. If you enjoyed this story of professional growth and redemption, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I share career insights and workplace stories every week that might just help you navigate your own professional journey. Thanks for listening, and remember, your unique background is your strength, not your limitation.